Hello. I'm really glad you're here tonight. This hour is different from the rest of the day. It doesn't ask you to decide anything. It doesn't ask you to perform or explain or keep up. It simply invites you to lie still and let your thoughts move at their own pace. As the years pass, nighttime becomes a kind of companion, a place where the mind is free to wander without interruption, where memories return, not urgently, but patiently, where understanding settles in quietly without needing words. Later in life, the mind doesn't race the way it once did. It reflects, it revisits, it connects dots that once seemed unrelated, and it does this most honestly when the lights are off and the world has gone silent. This wise is for those thoughts, the ones that don't surface during the day, the ones that arrive only when you're alone with yourself, resting, remembering, and gently making sense of a long, lived-in life. So take a slow breath, let your body soften into the bed, and allow this night to meet you where you are. And now, before we begin, if this kind of honest, gentle reflection speaks to you, take a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. And down in the comments, tell me where you're listening from and what time it is where you are right now. There's something comforting about knowing we're all here together, scattered across time zones, but united in these late hours when the world finally grows still. So settle in, adjust your pillows, find a comfortable position, and know that for the next hour, you're not alone in whatever wisdom you're carrying, whatever understanding you've earned, whatever truths rise to the surface when the lights go out. Let's begin. You are lying down right now, and that alone is something worth noticing, because you have spent decades not lying down. You have spent 60 or more years in motion, moving forward, moving through, moving past things you didn't always understand, and into things you weren't always ready for. You have been a person in perpetual forward motion, answering to schedules and obligations, responding to needs that weren't always your own, carrying responsibilities that didn't always leave room for stillness. And so tonight, the simple act of lying here, of being horizontal, of allowing your body to be fully supported without requiring anything further from it, is not nothing. It is a kind of arrival, and you have earned it. There is something that happens when you reach 60, something quiet and important that doesn't announce itself loudly or arrive with a ceremony or land in your lap, wrapped in a bow. It doesn't come all at once. It arrives slowly, the way the first light of morning arrives before the sun has actually risen, before the sky is fully bright. There is this soft, gauzy moment when the darkness begins to lift and everything exists in a gentle in-between. Neither night nor day, neither young nor old, neither who you were nor fully who you are becoming. You are in that in-between. You have lived long enough to understand some things, and you are still alive enough to feel them, still curious enough to keep asking, still present enough to be moved by the world around you. That place, that quiet, luminous in-between, is where acceptance lives. Not the forced acceptance of someone who has given up, not the brittle acceptance of someone pretending things don't hurt, but the earned, breathing, rooted acceptance that only arrives after you have lived long enough to see how a life actually moves, how it bends in directions you didn't plan, how it loses things you were sure were permanent, how it finds beauty in places you never thought to look. That kind of acceptance is one of the most remarkable things a human being can arrive at, and you are moving toward it tonight. Perhaps you've already arrived in many ways, even if you haven't stopped long enough to recognize it. So let's begin there, in the most immediate place, in the body. You are aware of your body right now, in a way that you probably weren't at 30. At 30, the body was mostly silent unless something went wrong. It simply did what you asked. It moved and lifted and ran and worked and stayed up late and recovered quickly, and you didn't think about it much because it gave you no reason to. You took its cooperation for granted. You used it like a reliable piece of equipment that you assumed would always function, always cooperate, always bounce back. You move through the world in it without stopping to appreciate the extraordinary machinery of what it actually was. The way your lungs inflated thousands of times a day without a single conscious instruction. The way your heart kept its rhythm through every moment of joy and grief and boredom and excitement without ever asking you to remind it. The way your legs carried you from room to room and year to year and decade to decade without asking for anything but an occasional rest. You didn't say thank you. You didn't even truly notice because you didn't have to, because it simply worked. But things have shifted. Your body speaks to you now, sometimes in a whisper, sometimes in a voice too loud to ignore. You feel the differences, the stiffness in the morning that takes a few minutes to ease through, the joints that announce the weather before any forecast does, the knees that remember old injuries or old games, or simply the accumulated testimony of years of motion, the back that holds the memory of every heavy thing you ever lifted, every long hour you ever sat at a desk, every time you pushed yourself past reasonable limits because there was no choice or because you didn't know yet how to have one. The face that carries every laugh, every worry, every squinting afternoon in the sun, every sleepless night, every expression of love and loss and wonder and exhaustion. Your body speaks all of this. And some nights, lying here in the dark, that awareness brings something that feels like grief. You grieve the body you used to have, the ease of it, the carelessness of it. You remember being able to sprint without thinking about it, being able to work all day and stay out half the night and feel tired but not broken, being able to bend and lift and recover and do it all again tomorrow. You remember a body that felt unconquerable, that never gave you a reason to worry about its eventual limits. You miss that sometimes. You miss the freedom of living in a body that never asked to be considered. And that grief is real, and it is allowed. You don't have to talk yourself out of it or dress it up in gratitude before you have actually felt it. You are allowed to mourn what has changed. You are allowed to feel sadness about what your body can no longer do. That is not self-pity. It is honesty. It is the completely natural response of a person who appreciated something and has had to slowly relinquish parts of it. The loss is real. The feeling is appropriate. And you can hold it without being destroyed by it. Because here is what also lives inside you now. something the younger version of you did not have and could not have had. Gratitude. Real gratitude. Not the performed kind. Not the polite acknowledgement you produce in public. The kind that arrives on its own, quietly, when you are doing something completely ordinary. When you are walking in the early evening and you feel the temperature of the air. When you take a warm shower after a long day and you feel it reach your bones. When you eat something simple and good and you actually taste it because you have learned somewhere along the way to slow down enough to taste things. When you see something beautiful, a sky, a face, a tree in a particular light, and you stop, you actually stop. Not because you made a decision to stop, but because something in you has learned, finally, that stopping is not a waste of time. It is the whole point. Your body is not your enemy. It never was. Even now, even changed, even limited in ways it wasn't before. It is still on your side. It wakes you every morning. It carries you through every day. It heals you slowly and imperfectly, but faithfully. It sleeps when you allow it to sleep and rises when you need it to rise. It has served you through childhood illnesses and the physical demands of young adulthood and the exhaustion of raising children perhaps, or caring for parents, or simply the sustained effort of building a life over many decades of weather and gravity and time. Every scar on your body tells a story of something survived. Every grey hair marks a year you were present for. Every line on your face is documentation of a person who was moved by their life, who laughed hard enough and worried deeply enough and lived openly enough to leave marks. Tonight, in this bed, you are practicing the acceptance of this body, not the body you wish you still had, the body that brought you here, the one that is breathing right now without being asked, the one that is resting right now, releasing the day, doing the faithful, quiet work of restoration that it performs every night without requiring your gratitude or even your awareness. Take a breath, a slow one. Feel your chest rise. Feel your lungs fill completely. Feel the exhale that follows, long and steady and easy. Your body knows what to do. It has always known. Trust it. Relax into it. Let it be enough. You had dreams once. Specific, detailed dreams. A picture you carried in your mind of how your life was going to unfold. You built that picture early, probably in your teens or your 20s, maybe even earlier. You saw a future self living somewhere particular, doing something particular, surrounded by people who loved and understood you, feeling a kind of happiness that seemed clear and achievable from a distance. You held that picture close. You aimed at it. You made choices in its direction. You sacrificed things to stay on course. You measured your progress against it. Some of it came true. Parts of the picture matched what life actually delivered. There were moments of genuine joy that lined up with what you had imagined. People who arrived in your life and fit into it perfectly, better than anything you could have designed. Work that gave you something you hadn't expected to love as much as you did. Places you ended up in that felt inexplicably like exactly where you were supposed to be. Some of the dream materialized, and those parts deserve to be honored. You did work hard enough. You did love well enough. You did arrive somewhere real and good, but some of it didn't happen, and you know exactly which parts those are. You have carried them quietly, the way you carry anything that matters too much to talk about casually. The career that didn't unfold the way you planned, that took turns you didn't choose, or closed doors you thought would stay open. The relationship you worked toward that ended before it should have, or never began, or transformed into something you barely recognized. The version of yourself you believed you were becoming, who never quite fully arrived. The financial security you aimed for that was interrupted by circumstances beyond your control. The health you assumed you would maintain. The time with people you thought you had and then, suddenly, didn't. Here is what can be true about all of that, now, from where you are standing. The life that didn't happen was not a failure of yours. It was simply not the life that belonged to you. The distance between the life you imagined and the life you actually lived is not a measure of your inadequacy. It is the completely ordinary, completely human distance between a young person's dream and the life that reality offers instead. Everyone who has ever lived long enough to look backward has this gap. Every single person, the most accomplished, the most celebrated, the most envied people you have ever known, still lie in beds at night and think about the roads they didn't take and the things they didn't get. This gap is not unique to you. It is not evidence of a life gone wrong. It is simply evidence that you were human enough to hope and alive enough to be disappointed when hope didn't fully deliver. And the life that did happen, the actual one, the lived-in, imperfect, specific, irreplaceable one, the one made of particular mornings and particular people and particular choices made under real pressure with incomplete information. That life has a kind of worth the imagined one never could have had, because it was real, because it was yours alone, because you were inside it, breathing it in, making decisions in the middle of uncertainty, loving people who were complicated, doing work that was imperfect, building something that was never quite finished, but was still something. Your real life is richer than any version you could have invented at 23. It has texture, it has contradiction, it has earned wisdom and genuine scars and specific joy and irreplaceable moments. The imagined life had none of that. It had only the smooth surface of a wish. Your real life has depth. Tonight, you are practicing the quiet, difficult, liberating acceptance of the life you actually lived, not the one you planned, the real one, with all its detours from the map, with all its surprising gifts and its unsought losses, with all the chapters you would rewrite if you could and all the chapters you would fight to keep exactly as they were. All of it. Yours, true, and in some deeply honest way, enough. The people in your life deserve their own acknowledgement tonight, because by 60, your history with people is long and layered and full of a meaning that simple summary can barely contain. You have loved people with everything you had. You have been hurt by people in ways that took years to recover from. You have forgiven things that required real work to forgive. You have held on to resentments longer than you should have, and let go of others faster than you expected. You have drifted from people who once felt essential and found depth in connections that crept up on you quietly. The human landscape of your life is not simple. It was never simple. And lying here in the dark, you can feel its full complexity. There are people you miss tonight. You can sense them in the quiet, the way you sense weather before it arrives. Friends who were once so present in your daily life that you could not have imagined your world without them. And then, gradually, without any single decisive moment, weren't there anymore. Not lost through conflict, lost through the natural drift that happens when lives move in different directions. When children grew and cities changed and careers took people elsewhere. When the routines that kept you in each other's orbits disappeared and the distance between you grew wider than either of you intended. You miss them with a particular kind of ache, not the sharp ache of fresh loss, but the low, persistent ache of realizing that some things cannot be recovered, only remembered. You miss being known by people who have known you long enough to hold the full story, who remember the version of you that existed before the losses, who knew your parents as living people, who were present at the beginnings of things that have long since ended. There is a specific loneliness in outliving the witnesses to your early life, in being, sometimes, the only remaining keeper of certain memories. That loneliness is real. It visits in the night, and you can hold it without being overcome by it. There are people you have loved and lost to death, and in this, acceptance does its deepest, most difficult, most necessary work. You cannot simply decide to be at peace with absence. You cannot force grief to resolve on a schedule. Peace with losing someone you loved comes slowly and incompletely and in layers. First, there is the raw wound that you weren't sure you would survive. Then, there is the scar that remains when the wound closes. Then, over years, the scar becomes simply part of you, part of how you move and choose and love. You carry your losses not as weights dragging you backward, but as presences that change the architecture of who you are. You would not be this person lying in this bed tonight with this particular depth and this particular tenderness without all the loving and the losing both. Tonight you can allow yourself to feel those presences gently, not with the tearing grief of early loss, but with the softer, warmer feeling of gratitude for having had them in your life, for having been altered by them, for carrying them forward in the only way they can now travel, which is inside you, in the way you laugh at things they would have found funny, in the way you hear their voice in certain situations with a clarity that still surprises you, in the way you reach for their wisdom in difficult moments, even though they are no longer there to offer it directly, in the way you cook something they loved, or use a phrase they used, or catch yourself making a gesture they always made, and realize with a quiet, bittersweet recognition that they are still here, not in the world, but in you, woven into you. That is where the people you loved most completely continue to live once the world no longer holds them. And there are the relationships that became complicated while people still live. The love that changed shape over decades. The family bonds that frayed under pressure or distance, or the accumulated weight of unspoken things. The friendships that cracked along lines no one fully saw coming. The children you raised with so much care and hope, who grew into people who needed things from you that you didn't always know how to give, or who gave you things you didn't always know how to receive. Human relationships do not remain fixed. They evolve and strain and sometimes break and sometimes, remarkably, repair themselves in ways you didn't expect. The landscape of love over a long life is not a simple, clear terrain. It is complicated ground. Tonight, you can hold all of that complexity without needing to resolve it. You can allow yourself the grace of acknowledging that you, too, were imperfect in your loving, that you hurt people, sometimes knowing it and sometimes without realizing it until it was too late, that you withheld things you should have given and demanded things you had no right to demand, that you were sometimes afraid and sometimes wrong and sometimes too proud to say so, and that this makes you human, not a failure of a person, human, and that a life full of complicated, imperfect, deeply felt connection is not a life wasted. It is a life lived all the way through. You worked. You gave a significant portion of your waking hours for decades to work, whether that was in an office, or a field, or a home, or a classroom, or behind a counter, or over a stove, or in a car driving routes that never changed. Whether the world gave you a title for it or didn't, whether the paycheck reflected its true value or fell short by half, you worked, you showed up, you gave your energy and your attention, and often more of yourself than anyone knew to ask for years, for the core years of your adult life. And now that chapter has changed, or is in the process of changing. And the transition is not always simple. For some, retirement feels like the release of a long-held breath, the end of an obligation that was honorably fulfilled, the beginning of something that finally belongs entirely to you. For others, it carries an unexpected hollowness, because work, with all its frustrations and demands, also gave you structure, purpose, a reason to be somewhere specific at a particular time, an identity that extended beyond the private self. And when that scaffolding comes down, you sometimes discover that you didn't know quite how much weight it was holding up. You may have built something you are genuinely proud of. A business, a body of work, a reputation, a classroom full of lives you touched, a garden of relationships with people you served well. That pride is real and earned and entirely yours. You are allowed to carry it without apologizing for it. The work you did mattered, even if it was never celebrated loudly enough, even if the recognition you deserved didn't always come, even if the evidence of your contribution isn't inscribed anywhere visible. You know what you built, and you know what it cost. That knowing belongs to you forever. Or perhaps the work was never what you wanted. Perhaps you spent years doing what was necessary rather than what was chosen. Work that paid for the life you were building even while leaving part of you unfed. Work done for love of family, for security, for simple survival. And perhaps there is a quiet regret in that, a wondering about the path not taken, the talent that never had enough room, the thing you might have made or taught or discovered if the circumstances had aligned differently. Here is what can be said about that honestly, from this distance. The choice to keep showing up to work that was not your dream, so that people depending on you were safe and fed and stable, that was not a failure of your ambitions. That was love in its most unglamorous, most sustained, most under-acknowledged form. The kind of love that never makes it into speeches or stories, but that holds entire lives together from underneath. That was who you were, and that too deserves your acceptance, your pride even. Time moves differently after 60. You understand this now, not as an idea, but as a lived experience in your body and your days. When you were young, time seemed boundless and therefore unimportant. You could afford to spend it carelessly. You would get around to things. You would make the call eventually. You would take the trip someday. You would be more present, more patient, more grateful once things settled down. Time was a resource you assumed was inexhaustible. But something shifts, quietly and permanently. The future acquires edges you can actually feel. And rather than making life darker, this clarity does something unexpected. It makes the present larger, more real, more worthy of your full attention. Small things acquire a weight they didn't carry before. A morning cup of something warm in a quiet house, the particular quality of light in late afternoon, the sound of rain on the window at night when you are safe and warm inside, the face of someone you have loved for a long time. These are not small things anymore. They have become the very substance of what it means to have lived, and the ability to recognize them as such, to actually feel them fully, rather than moving past them in a rush toward something else. That is one of the real gifts of age, not consolation, a gift. Tonight you are not waiting for something else to begin. You are not placing your peace somewhere out ahead of you, conditional on things changing or improving or resolving. You are here, right now, under these blankets, in this particular body, in this particular life. And this moment, imperfect and quiet and entirely ordinary, is enough. Not almost enough. Not enough once conditions improve. Enough exactly as it stands, in this room, on this night, with this breath. The night has grown fully quiet around you now. Whatever belonged to the day has been released back into the day. The thoughts that needed thinking have been thought. The feelings that needed to surface have been felt. You don't need to do anything else right now except this. Be here. Breathe. Let the weight of the blankets be exactly enough. Your body is releasing the day in layers. Your shoulders are softer than they were an hour ago. Your jaw has loosened. The small muscles around your eyes, which spent all day working, focusing, reacting, are resting now. Your hands, which worked all day, are open and still. Your legs are quiet. Your breath is slower than it was. Your whole body is doing the faithful, patient work of restoration it performs every night without needing your help or your permission. It knows what it's doing. It always has. Somewhere beneath the thoughts and the memories and the awareness of all that has been and all that still is, something quiet and solid is waiting for you. It has been here all along, underneath the noise of the day, underneath the effort and the worry and the remembering. It is the simple, unkillable knowledge that you are okay. That beneath everything uncertain and everything unresolved and everything that still aches a little, you are fundamentally, durably okay. Because you are still here. Because you have survived everything that has ever tried to stop you. Every loss that felt unsurvivable. Every fear that felt permanent. Every morning you didn't know how you were going to get through, and then you did. You survived all of it. And that is not small. That is the quiet, persistent miracle of being you. Rest in that now. Let that knowing be a foundation under you. Not a boast, a fact, a quiet and private truth that belongs only to you in this moment, in this bed, in this night. You have earned this rest, not just tonight. You have earned the deep, settled rest that comes only from having truly lived, from having cared enough to be hurt by things, from having tried hard enough to sometimes fail, from having loved people fully enough to miss them when they were gone, from having stayed through every season recognizably and essentially yourself. Let sleep come now if it will. Let the thoughts soften and lose their edges. Let the echoes of this section settle gently, like something coming to rest after a long journey. The second half of tonight is waiting to meet you, and together we will continue. You are still here. The night has held you this long, and it will continue to hold you. Whatever stirred in the first half of this hour, whatever surfaced and was acknowledged, whatever ached and was allowed to ache, all of it has settled a little now. The way sediment settles in water when the water stops being disturbed. Things become clearer. The view reaches further. And you are still here, breathing, present, resting in the quiet that has gathered around you, like something patient and kind. This second half of the night belongs to something particular. It belongs to the part of acceptance that is not about looking backward, but about arriving fully into who you actually are right now, tonight, at this age, in this life, with this specific, irreplaceable, hard-earned self that you have been building for 60 or more years without always realizing that building was what you were doing, because that is what all of it was. Every year, every season, every loss that remade you, and every joy that expanded you, and every ordinary Tuesday that passed without ceremony and left something behind in you anyway. You were always becoming this. You were always moving toward this particular version of yourself, the one lying in this bed right now, with this depth and this weariness and this capacity for both still intact. You didn't arrive here by accident. You arrived here through everything, through all of it. And who you are tonight is the sum of everything you have ever survived and chosen and loved and mourned and begun again. That is worth settling into, really settling into, not glancing at and moving past, actually sitting with it, the way you would sit with something precious that you finally have the time and the stillness to fully examine. You are someone who has lived a long life. You are someone who has been many things to many people. You are someone who has been remade more than once by circumstances you didn't choose. And you are still here, still recognizably yourself, still curious enough to be listening to this, still alive enough to feel the quiet of this room and the weight of these blankets and the slow, faithful rhythm of your own breathing. That is not ordinary. That is remarkable. And tonight, you are going to let yourself feel the full weight of how remarkable it is. There is something that needs to be said about regret. Because regret is one of the most faithful companions of a long life, and it deserves honest acknowledgement rather than cheerful dismissal. You carry regrets, real ones, not the small, casual kind that last an afternoon and disappear. The ones that have stayed, the ones that surface at 3 a.m. with a specific clarity and a familiar ache. The things you said that you cannot take back. The things you didn't say that you wish, with your whole body, you had said when there was still time. The opportunities you let pass out of fear. The kindnesses you withheld out of pride. The apologies that came too late or never came at all. The moments when someone needed you and you were not fully there. The choices that seemed reasonable in the moment and look different from here. You know exactly which regrets belong to you. I don't need to name them. They are already present in this room. They arrived when the lights went out, the way they always do, patient and persistent, the ones that know your night schedule better than anyone, and they deserve to be met honestly rather than pushed away again. Here is what is true about regret from the long view. Every regret you carry is evidence of something important. It is evidence that you have a conscience, that you care about doing right by people, that you hold yourself to a standard of behavior that matters to you. A person without regret is not a person who has lived well. They are a person who has never cared deeply enough to feel the weight of their own imperfection. Your regrets are proof of your moral seriousness. They are proof that you understood, even when you didn't act on that understanding, what was right and what mattered. But carrying regret indefinitely, past the point where it can teach you anything, past the point where action is still possible, past the point where the weight of it serves any purpose except to diminish you, that is not conscientiousness. That is punishment. And you have been your own harshest judge long enough. You have returned to those moments more times than they required. You have replayed them and re-examined them and found yourself guilty in them over and over again. And somewhere in the accumulated weight of all that self-judgment, the real lesson, which was never about punishment, but about understanding, has been buried. The real lesson is this: you were doing the best you could with what you understood at the time, not the best anyone could have done, not a perfect job, your best, given your history and your fears and your blind spots and the specific pressures of that moment, given all the ways your own wounds made it harder to see clearly, given everything you had not yet learned. You were doing what you knew how to do then, and some of it was not enough, and some of it caused harm you wish you had not caused, and you cannot go back and undo it. You can only carry it forward with awareness, with a willingness to do differently when similar moments arise, with the compassion for others that comes from knowing how profoundly human it is to fall short of your own values. Forgiving yourself is not the same as excusing yourself. It is not deciding that what happened was acceptable. It is deciding that you will no longer make yourself smaller in punishment for something that cannot be changed. It is deciding that the most useful thing you can do with your own imperfect history is to let it soften you rather than harden you, to let it make you more patient with other people's failures because you know from the inside how failure happens, to let it make you more honest in your current relationships because you have seen what the cost of silence and pride can be, to let it make you someone who says the important things while there is still time to say them. Tonight, in this bed, in this quiet, you can make that choice again. If you have made it before and it didn't fully hold, you can make it again. Forgiveness of yourself is not a single decision. It is a practice, something you return to again and again, each time you find yourself back in that familiar courtroom inside your own mind, prosecuting yourself for things long past. Each time you can gently close the proceedings. Each time you can say, I know what I did. I know what it cost. I have learned what it had to teach me. And I am choosing now, tonight, again, to carry this as wisdom rather than a sentence. You have reinvented yourself more than once. Perhaps you don't think of it in those terms. Perhaps what you experienced felt more like loss than reinvention. The job that ended, the relationship that dissolved, the role that expired when children left or parents died, or the community you built yourself around changed beyond recognition. But in each of those moments when something that had defined you fell away, you are required to ask a question that most people spend their whole lives avoiding. The question of who you are when you strip away the titles and the roles and the things you were to other people. When you remove the scaffolding of function and obligation and identity that was built around you by circumstance, what remains? You have asked that question. Maybe not in those words, maybe not consciously, but you have lived through the moments that ask it. And you are still here, which means something remained. Something that did not require a job title, or a family role, or a social identity to continue existing. Something that was yours before any of those things were added, and that continued to be yours when they were removed. That is your essential self, the one that persists, the one that is lying here right now, underneath all the accumulated layers of a lived life, still breathing, still present, still fundamentally and recognizably you. Getting to know that self, the one underneath the roles, is one of the unexpected gifts of this stage of life. When you were younger and the roles were new and demanding and consuming, there was barely space to wonder about the person underneath them. You were too busy being a parent, an employee, a spouse, a child, a neighbor, a professional, a responsible adult, to spend much time simply being a person, simply existing in the fullness of your own inner life without reference to what anyone needed from you. But now there is more space. Now the roles have shifted or thinned or changed in ways that leave more room for the person inside them to breathe, to move around, to discover what they actually like and what they actually think and what they actually want from whatever time remains. Have you discovered anything surprising? There are usually surprises. things you find you care about that you didn't expect to care about at this age. Interests that appeared late, after decades of being too busy for them. A quieter kind of pleasure than the pleasures of your younger years. Less noise, perhaps, less urgency. More appreciation for things that are slow and careful and made with real attention. More capacity for wonder at things that younger people rush past without noticing. More genuine interest in other people's inner lives, in what they are really feeling beneath what they present, in what their experience of being alive actually contains. This is the intelligence of age, not the sharp, fast intelligence of a young mind acquiring information quickly, the slow, deep intelligence of a person who has lived long enough to know what matters and what doesn't, who can read a room full of unspoken feeling because they have learned that feeling over decades of their own, who can sit with uncertainty without needing to immediately resolve it because they have learned that not all uncertainty resolves and that life continues beautifully in spite of that, who can be moved by ordinary things because they have learned that the ordinary is where most of life actually lives. This intelligence is rare, and it is real, and it belongs to you now. The nights are different after 60. You know this. You have lived through the change. Sleep does not arrive the way it once did, obligingly, the moment you closed your eyes, carrying you off to 8 unbroken hours that you barely noticed because they required no effort. Now sleep is a negotiation, a practice, a relationship you have to tend, rather than a state you simply fall into. You lie awake when you didn't expect to. You rise before the light in ways that surprise you. You move through the night in layers, in and out of depths, aware of the darkness in ways you weren't before. This is not only loss. There is something in the night hours that belongs specifically to this time of life. Something that becomes available in the wakefulness that younger people don't experience because they don't have enough life behind them yet to fill the silence with. The middle of the night, when you are awake and the world is genuinely still, becomes a different kind of territory after 60. A place where you can actually hear yourself, where the internal noise of busy days subsides, and what remains is something clearer and more essential. Your own actual thoughts, your own actual feelings, unmediated by distraction or obligation or performance. Some of what surfaces in those quiet hours is uncomfortable. The worries that daytime busyness keeps at bay have a habit of arriving at 2 in the morning with full clarity and an unpleasant insistence. The thing you need to address that you have been successfully avoiding. The fear you haven't yet allowed yourself to feel in the daylight because feeling it would make it more real. The question about the future that has no comfortable answer. You know these visitors. They have a particular quality, the nighttime worries. They feel larger and more definitive in the dark than they will feel in the morning light. They insist on permanence in a way that the morning will gently contradict. But in the moment they arrive, they feel absolute. What you have learned to do with them matters, not to fight them or deny them or spiral into them, but to acknowledge them the way you would acknowledge any visitor who arrives unexpectedly. To say, I see you. I know what you are. You are a worry. You feel enormous right now because it is dark and I am alone and my defenses are down. But I have met you before, and morning always comes, and I am still here. And the thing you are insisting is a catastrophe has, on every previous occasion, turned out to be something I was able to move through. I don't know everything about what lies ahead. No one does. But I know this. I have never yet encountered a darkness I was not eventually able to move through. And that record means something. Tonight, you can let those nighttime visitors pass through without taking up permanent residence. You can notice them the way you notice weather, as something happening, real and present, but passing, as something that does not require your full attention and your deepest engagement at this particular moment. You can say, gently, not tonight. Tonight is for rest. Tonight is for the kindness of letting go. And you can turn your attention deliberately, gently, back to the breath, back to the weight of the blankets, back to the quiet room and the still house, and the soft, constant fact of being alive and resting and held. There is a kind of simplicity available to you now that was not available when you were younger, and that is one of the most quietly profound gifts of this stage of life. The simplicity of knowing what is actually important. You have spent enough years now with the full panorama of what a life contains, the achievements and the failures, the great loves and the long loneliness, the noise of ambition and the quiet of satisfaction, the years of striving and the seasons of grief, and the ordinary stretches that seemed unremarkable as they were being lived, but that you understand now, with the very fabric of everything. After all of that, the list of what genuinely matters has gotten shorter, more honest, more real. The things that once seemed essential, the status and the recognition and the comparisons and the social calculations and the performances of success and the management of how other people perceived you. Those things have lost their grip in a way that is deeply freeing. Not because you stopped caring about people or about doing good work or about being someone whose life had meaning, but because the particular anxiety of needing to be seen in a certain way, the exhausting work of curating your image and managing your reputation and keeping up with a version of yourself that was built more for display than for living, that has loosened. You have become more interested in being than in being seen, more interested in depth than in breadth, more interested in the few things that genuinely nourish you than in the many things that once competed for your attention. This simplicity is not resignation. It is not giving up. It is editing, the kind of careful, confident editing that only becomes possible once you have lived long enough to know what survives the test of actual living and what turns out to have been noise all along. You are less interested in being impressive than in being honest, less interested in being busy than in being present, less interested in having more than in being able to fully inhabit what you already have. That is not small. That is a kind of mastery that took a lifetime to arrive at. Think about the things that genuinely brought you peace this week. Not the things you accomplished, not the things you produced or contributed or managed. The things that gave you a moment of actual, uncomplicated peace. A conversation with someone you love where where you both said something true, a meal that was simple and satisfying, a moment outside where the light or the temperature or the particular quality of the air reached inside you and reminded you that the world is still beautiful. A piece of music that went directly to some place in you that words don't reach. A book that made you feel less alone in some private struggle. A memory that arrived unexpectedly and left you moved. Those things. The ones that don't make it into conversations about productivity or success or contribution. Those are the things that are actually making your life worth living right now. And they don't require anything from you. They don't require you to be younger or richer or more capable or more recognized. They require only that you be present enough to receive them, awake enough, open enough, slow enough, all of which you are capable of, especially now, especially at this age, when you have finally given yourself permission to stop rushing past what is actually nourishing in pursuit of what you were told should be nourishing. The people who will outlive you are carrying more of you than you know. This is something that becomes visible only from this vantage point. When you are young, you think of your influence primarily in terms of the things you make and the positions you hold and the achievements that can be pointed to. But looking back now, you can see that what you actually passed on to the people around you was something far less visible and far more lasting. The way you handled difficulty, the particular way you loved, the values you held so consistently that they became the air people breathed when they were in your presence, the humor you brought to situations that could have been only grim, the steadiness that made other people feel like the ground was solid even when it wasn't, the way you listened to someone, the way you showed up. Your children or the young people in your life, if you have them, are carrying you forward in ways they haven't yet fully articulated to themselves. They use phrases you used. They make decisions according to values you modeled without always naming them. They reach for patience in difficult moments because they watched you reach for it. They understand that love is not only a feeling, but a behavior, a choice made again and again under pressure, because they saw you make that choice. They know that you can survive great loss and continue to be a person of warmth and generosity because you showed them that. In you, in the living example of your own continued presence after everything that tried to stop you, you are already a legacy. Not a finished one, not a static one, but a living one, still being written in the lives of people you have touched. Your story is not over, and it is not only your own. It is also in them, moving forward, changing them, shaping the decisions they will make in years you will never see. That is not nothing. That is one of the most profound things a human being can be. A person whose presence altered the trajectory of other people's lives, gently and permanently, in ways that will continue to ripple outward long after they are gone. The question of what comes next, not next year, not next decade, but ultimately, that question lives somewhere in every person who has reached 60. You don't have to pretend it doesn't. You know that you are in the later portion of the story now. You know that the years behind you outnumber the years ahead, and you hold that knowledge with whatever combination of feelings it brings in you. some fear perhaps, some peace, some unanswered questions about what death actually is and what, if anything, follows it. Some sadness about the things you will leave and the people you will leave them. This is one of the places where acceptance does its most quietly profound work. Not the acceptance of death as an abstract concept, but the daily, practical, tender acceptance of your own mortality. The acceptance that allows you to love what you have without the paralysis of terror about losing it. The acceptance that makes the morning cup of tea taste better and the evening sky look more beautiful and the voice of someone you love mean more. The acceptance that turns ordinary moments into the extraordinary thing they actually are. You don't have to have resolved the great metaphysical questions to be at peace with your finitude. You don't have to know what comes after or have settled into a certainty about the nature of existence or the meaning of a life. You can hold those questions openly as the interesting and unanswerable questions they are, without needing them to be resolved before you're allowed to feel okay. Peace with mortality is not the absence of questions. It is the willingness to live fully anyway, to love fully anyway, to be present fully anyway, to bring everything you have to the days that are given rather than saving yourself for a certainty that will never arrive. What you are doing tonight, lying here, breathing slowly, letting the day release, allowing your mind to move through memory and feeling and understanding without urgency. This is a form of that practice. This is the daily cultivation of presence and peace. This is you choosing, one more time, to be fully here rather than somewhere else in your mind, fully in this body, in this room, in this life, in this particular and unrepeatable night. Let the breath come slower now, slower than it has been. There is nothing that requires your attention tonight that cannot wait until morning. There is no thought so urgent that it must be completed before sleep comes. There is no problem so pressing that it cannot rest alongside you in this darkness and be met again in the light of tomorrow with a clearer mind and a rested body. Everything can wait. Everything is allowed to wait. Feel the place where your body meets the mattress, the specific points of contact, your heels, the backs of your legs, your spine, your shoulders, the back of your head against the pillow. Notice how completely you are supported, how you don't have to hold yourself up, how the bed has you, how gravity, that faithful companion you have been working with and occasionally against your entire life, is simply doing what it always does, holding you to the earth, keeping you here, grounding you in the most literal possible sense. You are held. Tonight you are held by something larger than yourself, by the simple fact of the physical world continuing to exist around you, by the faithfulness of a body that is still working, still breathing, still restoring itself with patient expertise, by the accumulated presence of everyone you have ever loved, living and gone both, all of them woven into who you are now, by the long thread of your own life, stretching back through all those versions of yourself, all those seasons and transitions and survivals, leading to exactly this moment. You are held by all of it. You are the sum of all of it, and you are enough. The regrets are quieter now. They have been heard tonight. You gave them room and you did not look away, and they have received the acknowledgement they came for. They don't need to shout anymore. They can rest alongside you in the dark. The losses are quieter too. They have been honored. The people you miss have been thought of with love and with gratitude, and they are closer tonight for having been remembered. The dreams that didn't happen have been released a little further. Not forgotten, released. Set down gently into the past where they belong, with respect for the hope they represented and the person who carried them so faithfully for so long. What remains after all of that is simply you, here, alive, resting, breathing in the particular darkness of this particular room, on this particular night, in a life that has been genuinely yours, imperfect and specific and full of more meaning than you have ever fully been able to take in. A life that continues to offer you mornings, that continues to offer you the faces of people you love, that continues to offer you the small, daily gifts that are available only to someone who has learned to slow down enough to receive them. A life that is not finished yet. Let your eyes stay closed now. Let the thoughts lose their edges. This is the hour when the mind finally agrees to stop working and simply drifts, like a boat that has been pushing against the current all day, and finally, in the shelter of a cove, is allowed to go still, to rock gently, to let the water hold it without requiring any effort in return. You have worked hard, in every sense. You have worked hard at your job and at your relationships, and at the sustained effort of being a good person in circumstances that were not always easy. You have worked hard at surviving things that were not survivable, and yet here you are, having survived them. You have worked hard at loving people who were complicated and at being patient when patience was difficult, and at getting back up when getting back up seemed impossible. You have done the long, unglamorous, essential work of living a real life all the way through, and you are still at it, still here, still willing to listen to something like this in the last quiet hour of the day, because something in you remains curious and open and willing to be moved. That willingness is one of the most beautiful things about you. At an age when some people have closed down, when the accumulated weight of disappointment and loss has made some people rigid and defended and unwilling to let new things in, you are still here, still soft enough to be reached, still open enough to feel something in the dark. That openness is not weakness. It is one of the rarest and most valuable forms of strength a human being can carry into later life. The strength to stay tender, to stay curious, to stay available to wonder and to grief and to connection and to the quiet, ordinary beauty of still being alive. Let that openness carry you now into sleep. Let it be the last thing you feel as the thoughts slow and the night deepens and the breath becomes more even and more easy. You are safe. You are home. You are held by everything you are and everything you have been and everything you have loved. The acceptance you have been practicing tonight is not a destination you have to arrive at perfectly or permanently. It is a direction. And tonight, you are facing it. Tonight, you are moving toward it in the best way available to you, which is simply by being here, quietly, honestly, without pretending that the things are different than they are, and still finding at the bottom of everything that there is enough, that you are enough, that this life, this actual one, with all its imperfection and all its irreplaceable specific beauty, has been worth every single year you have given to it. The body is heavy now in the good way, heavy with rest, heavy with release, heavy with the settling that happens when a long day reaches its true end. Your breath is your only work now, in and slow and full, out and long and easy, in, out. The room is quiet. The world outside is still. Somewhere in the distance, the ordinary sounds of a living world continue, but they are not yours to answer to tonight. They are simply the sound of the world continuing, as it will continue steady and faithful, with you in it for as many mornings as you are given. And you will meet those mornings. You will pull back the covers and rise into another day carrying everything tonight has offered you. The quieter regrets, the honored losses, the acceptance settling a little more deeply into the places it is still learning to reach. The knowledge renewed again that you are fundamentally okay, that the ground beneath you holds, that the thread of your life, however it has bent and surprised you, has led you to a person worth being. But that is morning. Morning will take care of itself. Tonight belongs to this, to the breath, to the dark, to the slow, faithful work of rest. The fires die down, the stories settle, and the world grows still. Let your thoughts drift away like embers on the wind. Good night. You've journeyed far through time tonight. Now it's time to journey into dreams. Close your eyes, breathe, and let sleep find you.